Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about automating your Airbnb business so that you never have to deal with customers again. So let's get this show started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life: prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Boss. All right, ladies and gentlemen, he's helping everyday people create six-figure businesses without buying the real estate. He's showing us how to automate everything from bookings to cleanings, funding deals with zero interest money. So please welcome to the show, the Airpreneur himself, Mr. Adam Hager. All right, Adam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, dude. Actually, let me see. This camera movement's not working today, but all right, we'll kind of work with that. Well, anyways, before we get this thing started on the details of what you got going on here, give me a little bit of background story. How did you get into the Airbnb space? How long have you been going at it?
Yeah, no worries. Look, first off, I just want to say thank you for having me on. I've been listening to your show, and I know what you guys are doing here is something special. And I know it's hard to do. It takes a lot of effort. And I know you're out here helping a lot of people with their businesses, and I want to be a part of it. One quick thing for everybody listening, do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're tuning in. I just did mine over an Apple Podcast the other day. But with that out of the way, yeah, let's dive into things. Your question was how did I start, or what exactly?
Yeah. Give me a little bit of background story. I mean, you're where you're at today, but where'd you start? How'd you get started?
Yeah. So 4 years ago, I was selling software, right? And I realized that I didn't want to be in a 9-to-5 forever. There was something about it that I just didn't like. I liked the people, I actually liked the leadership team I was working with, but I didn't like I didn't have the ability to travel, to spend the time that I want to do that. I felt like 2 weeks of PTO a year was kind of a bit of a crime. And I was trying to find a way to build some passive income, build some cash flow, something I can work on after my 9-to-5. And I stumbled across Airbnb. And actually, the first landlord I talked to pitch them on the idea of me using their property for Airbnb, I actually landed that deal. The very first person I pitched, which is not common. I may have gotten a little bit lucky, but it got me excited, right? It got me excited, and I kept just pursuing and growing. And eventually, about a year after that, I ended up being able to do Airbnb full time, keep growing the portfolio, learn so much more about it, and then I've now helped hundreds of other people do the same.
Dude, what a cool story. I mean, okay, so you started off a little bumpy with one win and then a couple losses after that. Did you get discouraged at all? Like, was there at any point where you were Ooh, sorry. I just lost connection there. Am I back?
All good. Yes. So my second deal, you hear me, right? We're good?
We back. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're good.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. We just lost the connection there for a second. That's what happens when you have a live show. Sometimes that happens. Anyways, where was I at? I was talking about the.
Yep. You asked, what happens when something went wrong, right? After I lost some deals and whatnot.
Okay. So you had a bumpy road. You started off really strong, and then maybe you had a bumpy road. What was your mindset to keep going there? I know there's been a huge boom in Airbnb, and then we had some fluctuations in the market. How did that affect you, and how did you continue to go forward?
Well, my second deal was what's called a property management deal. And that's where you manage a property for a landlord on Airbnb, and you basically take a percentage of the revenue, of the profits. So you have no money. It's impossible to lose money if you're doing this. You can only make money because you're managing the listing for them. I had done all the work to set everything up, done everything. I was actually then flying somewhere. And when I got to my destination in the airport, 2 days before I was supposed to go live, the landlord actually pulled the deal, said he was going to do it himself. He didn't want us anymore, even though we spent all this time setting everything up. And that was discouraging because that was my second property. But I was like, hey, I can't quit from this. We know it works. The process works. I got this opportunity. If I keep going, I'll get more opportunities. I just have to not quit. And actually, because I started this around January of that year, I made a commitment to myself when kind of the New Year's ball dropped that like I would not quit. Like I would just keep going. Because if you keep going, eventually you'll get the momentum, and whatever it is you're doing, whatever business you're doing, you will get the momentum and you'll keep learning if you just don't stop. And that was just
100%.
my mindset at that time.
Yeah, dude, 100%. Like, it doesn't matter whatever you set your mind to, you're going to make it happen. Now, it might not happen at the pace that you thought it was going to happen. It might be a little bit more expensive than you thought it was going to be, but you'll eventually for sure get there. Let me ask you about that tenacity that you have. I know a lot of people, when they get started in business, don't have that. They're looking for a more automated, more smooth, streamlined system to get into. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned since you started and what you've created.
Well, I mean, now I have a streamlined system, right? I kind of have a step-by-step process, exactly what to do. And it's basically plug and play. Every new property, every new listing we have goes into the same system with the same operations as every other listing. So it's a walk in the park now. It's really easy. We know every single thing that could happen, how to handle it, how to automate it, make sure that everything's going smoothly. And then I basically applied that system to everything I learned to my community. I run a company called Airpreneur, and we essentially help business professionals that are looking to build that passive income without necessarily having to buy property, because buying property for Airbnb is very expensive, right? You might be able to save enough money for a down payment on a home and get that property, but you're not going to make enough cash flow from that property to quit your job or really buy back your time for your family. But if you use what we call arbitrage, which is where you leverage other people's property, you can scale a lot faster and within 1 year generate enough consistent monthly cash flow that you could quit your job or you could work part-time to then kind of rededicate that to your family or use that money for longer term investments.
Some of the big fears people have when they get into buying property and then trying to go Airbnb is that some cities are changing jurisdictions and rules and regulations between homeowners associations are coming up and like knocking this business down. How do you combat that when people come in with those types of questions?
Yeah, I think that's a common fear that's overinflated. And if you just look at the United States as a whole, the vast majority of cities completely allow Airbnb. Now, there are major cities that have some restrictions, meaning they want you to apply for a permit, but that's just so they can collect tax dollars. See, short-term rentals drive a lot of revenue to cities. Most cities don't want to completely outright ban it. They just want to monitor it in a way that they know that they're collecting the necessary tax dollars that they're supposed to be. And getting those rental licenses can be very easy. And honestly, most places, and even most places I operate in my portfolio, you don't even need any license still. There's still a lot of places in the US that you probably don't even know are nearby you or within a 3-hour radius that'd be good for Airbnb to start. And you don't need, that would be 100% allowed. You don't need all this paperwork.
What are some other myths like in this Airbnb business? As markets are starting to cool down in real estate as of late, what are some of the myths that you've come across when people come up to you and want to learn a little bit more about being in the Airbnb business?
No, it's a good question. I think one of them is that everybody thinks of Airbnb and they think of vacations. They think, oh, I'm not in a vacation area. I'm not in a vacation destination. Like, I don't think Airbnb is going to work here. That's completely not true. I have over a 36 unit portfolio and I only have 2 vacation homes. The rest of them are not even in vacation areas. You can make money with a general single family home in your medium-sized city or your small city. In fact, I started in my small hometown and that I've had that property now for over 3.5 years. It has consistently made $1,000 to $2,000 profit every single month since I launched it. And most people have never even heard of my town, and they're certainly not coming here for vacation.
Yeah, there's different people that take on these short-term rentals. I got a buddy that actually does a little bit of Airbnb himself, and he uses medical professionals, people that come in from the hospital for a couple days at a time, maybe a week at a time. Hospital pays for their stays, and that's where they tend to go. So it's kind of a great different approach to having a niche in a market and buying in a city where or not even having to buy in a city, but coming in and working in a city where you have that consistent tenant coming in on a regular basis. When somebody wants to get started with something like this, like, do they need a lot of cash up front? Usually when you think real estate related, you're thinking huge down payments. You said no, 0 down. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you can theoretically start with $0 if you do what I call co-hosting, which is where you manage a property for somebody else on Airbnb. However, The easier path, I think, is if you do have a little bit of startup capital, let's just say $5,000 to $10,000, you can get your first property. However, there's ways around that. There's actually this concept called business credit. So once you apply for your LLC through a company like LegalZoom, et cetera, and you get what's called your EIN number, employment identification number, that allows you, as long as you're a US citizen, to apply for what's called business credit. Business credit is essentially 0% interest business loan for an entire year. So you may get qualified for $20,000 of the 0% interest business credit card, and you only have to pay it back if you use it, and you can just pay it back from the profits of your property. So if you know what you're doing, you can expand very rapidly without even using your own cash. So to give you perspective, I reinvested all of my profits to continue growing, but I also, the vast majority of my setup costs was from business credit. I didn't have to use my own personal cash.
So when you're taking on a new landlord's property, do they usually come unfurnished? Do they usually come furnished? How do you kind of convince them or guarantee them that they're going to get the rent that otherwise they would get in a normal market, which is hopefully they're trying to cash flow, if or even break even at all? How do you kind of, I mean, the number that you might throw at them will be better than they would with a normal tenant. However, sometimes things are too good to be true. How do you sell that?
Yeah, so actually, I don't even pay them more money than they would from a normal tenant. I pay them they're looking for a long-term renter, right? This is what a landlord wants. They want it to be passive. They don't want to have to think about it. They want to make a little over their mortgage and just know that it's like being handled. Well, what do we know from, especially if you're listening, if you own a property and you have a long-term tenant, you know it's not that easy. Things break, things happen. It ends up being more work than you realize. As a business, as a short-term rental company, you can go to these landlords and basically actually make it truly passive. If there's a toilet issue or there's a guest issue or whatever, you're the one to handle that, not the landlord. So the landlord can actually sit back and just collect the money on a monthly basis. And since you're a business and not a family, as long as you're making money, you could stay there for 10 years. And in fact, that landlord's probably want to give you other properties they purchase in the future, because instead of going out there and qualifying tenants, doing background checks, trying to find somebody who legitimately wants to stay at the property, they're just going to offer to you because they already know that you're good at what you do, you pay them consistently, and that it's actually passive income.
All right, well, that brings on the next headache, right? Like, I don't want to answer the calls when there's a toilet broken. I don't want to be the one going out and fixing things. I don't want to turn the properties around when the tenant leaves. How can I ensure that I get good vendors, quality people? And then I kind of want it to be hands-off kind of myself, right? That I know the landlord for sure wants it to be hands-off. I kind of do too.
Yeah, so most of the time, it's pretty easy to find good quality people that you can call on when there's an issue. I mean, if you have a newer property, you're probably not going to have many issues at all. And if you do, it's going to be minor that you can have a handyman fix, like a doorknob falls off or a couch breaks, right? Something that you purchased that you're going to get fixed for a guest. It's not really going to be something where you have to physically go to the property. In fact, I actually have what's called virtual assistants, somebody who lives in another country that actually used to work at Airbnb. So ex-Airbnb employees, they run my entire business and they run my students' businesses so that it's actually passive. So you don't even have to be the one to talk to the guests. Once you have the software set up and you have your virtual assistant set up, the only thing you have to worry about is pricing your listing or making sure that it's getting booked at the right price.
What are some things like pricing that somebody needs to know when they're going to get in this game? Like if somebody's you've piqued an interest, right? They're like, okay, yeah. I can definitely maybe build this business on the side, and they want to educate themselves a little further. What should they do in order to get that education, and what should it be about?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, gone are the days where you can just list any property with pictures from your phone and it's going to make money. That's no longer the case. 10, 15 years ago, you could do that. You're going to make money, but it's become too competitive now. You have to treat it like a business. And I think the best thing you can do is just be on the pursuit to learn as much as possible. Obviously, I provide a bunch of free resources and I can direct you guys to that as well. But there's a lot of people that provide those resources just to start learning so you can feel confident. And obviously, you can't replace experience. Once you have your first property, you go through the experience of setting everything up and the softwares and learning it. It's going to be a lot easier for you to duplicate that process. I actually just helped some of my family members do this, and they set up their first listing 4 months ago, and in May it made $2,000 for them, and this is their first business they've ever done.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Now when you're building this out for somebody, what can they expect when they're first getting started? Like, who's the target audience that you're looking for? And then when they're getting ready to get started, what can they expect?
Yeah, look, anybody that is in a 9 to 5 that doesn't want to be there, or is just an aspiring entrepreneur to spend more time with their family or to reinvest into purchasing real estate, I think the best way to even purchase real estate is to build up cash flow with an Airbnb business so that you can reinvest. So if you're one of those people, I think the best place to start is going to be locally within a 2-hour distance and targeting single family homes where landlords want long-term tenants, because a single family home can fit minimum 4 people if it's a 2-bedroom, but usually they're 3 bedrooms. They can usually fit 6 to 8 people. A good rule of thumb is that the more people that can sleep at your property, the more money you can charge per night, which means more profits going into your bank account.
So when you're first getting started in this space, we talked about about $5,000 to get you started. Obviously, You're going to need some stuff like furniture to kind of furnish the place, get it all up to wherever you need it to be, so it has I guess a nice Instagrammable look. But then the other side of that, when you're first getting It must be that kind of day. All right, sorry about that. So when you're first getting started, you for sure are maybe you're in a situation where you don't have the credit, or maybe you already are renting a place. Do you have to get creative with the financing when you're talking to the landlord in order to secure some of these long-term leases? I've heard some people get into the position where they're like, we'll pay 3 months in advance to kind of lock in a couple deals. Does that happen like afterwards as well, or just towards the beginning?
Most landlords, when they know you're a business and they believe what you're telling them and they know you're professional, don't even ask for your financials. They just assume that you can pay it, and that you don't really have to provide that kind of proof. But they usually just do a standard background check. However, most people can qualify for business credit, like I mentioned earlier. So there is a process you can go through that we walk everybody through to apply in a specific order to actually get $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that you can then use to furnish the properties, even if you don't maybe have all of that cash on hand to start with, and then use the profits to just pay that back. Like I said, you could also do co-hosting, which is $0 down. That is when you manage a listing for a landlord and you guys just split the profits. In that situation, the landlord is actually paying for everything. They're paying for the furniture, they're paying for the utilities, they're paying for the cleaning, they're paying for anything that breaks. But the reason they would do that is that they're actually going to make a lot more money than they would from a long-term tenant. Let's just say hypothetically, they're looking for $2,000 in rent. They may make closer to $2,800 to $3,000 plus working with you, as opposed to having a long-term tenant in that scenario.
Yeah, let me ask you a little advice, since you've been in the game for a while. When they're looking for any type of vendor to come in, you mentioned how you have the VAs that kind of already worked at Airbnb. I want to make sure if I'm getting started, I get kind of same types of people. I make sure that I get quality people to take care of these properties. Any advice for new people in the Airbnb space when vetting vendors?
Well, the most important person you can hire is a virtual assistant that used to work at Airbnb. There is a website you can use called onlinejobs.ph, where you can search just the word Airbnb and find people who do work or have worked at Airbnb, and you can interview them and make sure, hey, they speak good English, etc., and you can hire them. As far as contractors and things like that, I actually leverage Craigslist. I think TaskRabbit and Angie's List, they usually charge way too high. I found all of my great long-term handyman, great reliable people through Craigslist, actually. And you can make an ad on Craigslist for $5.
Dude, that's not bad. I mean, it's pretty inexpensive to be able to take care of that in a quick and easy and efficient way. Let me ask you about horror stories, dude, because I know everybody has them. They're part of the real estate game.
Yeah.
I used to have a property in Texas. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and I always tell my students, anyways, about the story where I get the call from the property manager and they turned it into a grow room. And I'm like, oh, man, here's the insurance claim. What's some of those scary stories that maybe sounded scary when you first tell it, but have a different kind of result at the end? Maybe you have a happy ending.
4 months into my journey, company, maybe I had 4 properties at this point. It's my one property is 2 weeks launch, and it's like a Friday night. And I'm about to go to sleep. It's like 12 o'clock. And then all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up on Airbnb, and there's a party going on. And I noticed it, and I look at my cameras, and sure enough, there's like 20 kids there. I have to call the cops 4 times. I stay up till 3 a.m. I see footage of people dancing and stuff. I'm getting threatening messages from the neighbors who found my Airbnb listing saying they're going to report me to the city council and blah, blah, blah. Now, keep in mind, I just started this relationship with the landlord. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how much is going to be damaged. I don't know what's going on. I got to say, that is the one moment early on where I was like, wow, is this worth this? Is it worth this? Is it like, should I be an entrepreneur? Should I be doing this? Because it's very stressful at the time. This all happened because I missed clicking one button on Airbnb because I was newer and I didn't follow the protocol. I didn't have the step-by-step. So I was going for trial and error. I've never had that issue again. I actually was able to file what's called claims with Airbnb. Airbnb has its own insurance. So it actually protects you in the event that guest damages something, which is another thing people are worried about. What if a guest damages my sofa or couch or they smoke? Airbnb pays you out for that. I actually made $1,000 off of that party. The only thing that was ruined was a rug. The landlord didn't care. And after a week, the neighbors settled down. And now it's been 2.5 years and I haven't had any problems since. So I think the lesson there is it seems like a big deal in the moment, but most of the time it's not as big as a deal as you think. And you're going to be able to work through that.
I always feel like when you talk to somebody who's in the game, who's been doing it for a while, those are the best mentors to work with because you've already gone through that first victory feeling and then the despair. You've gone through the deals that are about to go great and then at the last minute get chopped up, or the ones that you think are going great and get that police phone call in the middle of the night. Like those are all great experiences. And I'm sure you have more if people want to reach out to you and find out more about what you got, especially like at your website, which scrolling right there across the bottom, airpreneur.com.
Yeah.
What are they going to find and how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, well, look, I appreciate how much you give back to everybody on your program. So I wanted to do a little something special for everybody here listening. If you are that 9-to-5 professional or entrepreneur looking to get an Airbnb but don't want to necessarily have to buy a property, I have 2 things I'm gonna give you to make this easier. The first one is called the Airbnb Market Launch Blueprint. It's going to be a 5-step process that shows you, okay, in your area, how can you find the best properties? What can you search for? How can you make sure you can find a good property? It's a whole in-depth PDF, super in-depth that I made that's going to show you how to do that. The second is after you go through that, you're obviously going to have questions on, okay, well, how do I get started? What do I do? I'm not really sure about this. So I usually reserve this for clients, but I want to open it up to everybody. It's called the first deal clarity session. So not only am I going to give you the market guide, but we can set up a call where we'll go 60 minutes in depth to find out, okay, like where are you struggling with, where are you looking to get to? And we'll just create that roadmap and game plan so that you can take those action steps to implement it to actually go get your first property. All you have to do is go to my Instagram. That's where I'm most responsive. Adam_Airpreneur. You can see right there, AIR, like preneur, PRENEUR, and just message me the word business bros. So I know that you actually came from this, right? And I can happily send both of those things over to you. That's going to be a great start. If you only do that, you're going to have a much solid understanding of how to actually get started in this business.
My brother was in the military for some time, and he says that there's a saying that every rule is written in blood because something happened and then you had to develop a process. I feel like the tools that you're offering, the blueprint, and the clarity session is a little bit different, but the blueprint for sure. There's a reason behind why it exists. Can you give me a little bit of background on it?
Yeah. So people are always asking, like, what's the best way to know if your market's good? Like, are there any tools? Are there any softwares? Is there anything there? And I kept kind of repeating myself. And yeah, I can make a YouTube video, but it's not as easy. People don't really want to go through it. It doesn't have every step by step. It's hard to show that on a YouTube video. So I just took all of the knowledge that I had on it and I made it into a very clear, very readable PDF that people can just follow step by step. There's no confusion to actually click the buttons to know for sure that their area is going to be good for Airbnb and exactly what part of their city is going to be good to start in.
All the information you need to get yourself in a position to win. And that's, again, going from experience. This is why, like, if you're going to get into the game, might as well start with somebody who's already been doing it, who's got a blueprint laid out. Can't believe it. 3 times in
It's
one
not your text day
session.
today.
Woo! I'm gonna go like play a lottery ticket or something. Some weird stuff. Well, anyways, guys, like I was saying, look, the mentor who's already done it, that's the person you want to reach out to. Make sure you guys go to his website, airpreneur.com. Reach out to Adam. Ask him a million questions. Get yourself involved. Have that clarity session. Do what you need to do to get yourself started, because at the other side of your action is going to be the result that you're looking for. You can think about it all you want, but unless you take that action and take that first step, and you never know, you might be like Adam here and close your first deal. How cool would that be? So if you guys have any questions, make sure you guys reach out to Adam. Airpreneur.com. Adam, any final thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, no, I definitely hit me up if you have any questions. I had a woman today ask me, hey, can you check this property to see if it actually be good in my city? And she's not my client or anything. She's just someone who messaged me. And I said, no problem. Gave her my email, and I'm actually going to look at it after this podcast and get back to her. So there's no dumb question. There's no overcomplicated. As long as you hit me up on Instagram and Adam_Airpreneur, definitely be able to help you. But yeah, again, also, Hernan, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Course, my brother. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That's all we got for you guys today. Adam, thank you very much for being on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out.
It's over. Go home.
Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast, but not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.com.